Mr. Nassim Taleb.
The
Taleb,
original Swan Man.
the original
It's where the
Swan
name
Man.
comes from for the whole company and everything. I've got it's hidden behind a Bitcoin magazine now, but I've got the inserto there right behind the Bitcoin magazine.
And he, the inserto is his series of 5 books. He's just a brilliant guy, basically. I mean, most of my audience probably knows of him or his thinking, but I guess the quick gist on what he did is he spent most of his life reading all these classics, and then he had a career on Wall Street in risk and mathematics, and he sort of just synthesized those two worlds to really explain a lot of very complicated topics in an entertaining and compelling way, largely as it relates to investment and ethics and many other things. I mean, he's a pretty universal guy. But he is also notoriously anti-Bitcoin as of relatively recently. I don't think he was like this the entirety of Bitcoin's life. But
I mean, we know he was down with it enough to tweet about it and talk about it in 17, 18, and enough to agree to write the foreword for Safe's book,
right,
which came out March or April of 2018.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
So
from 2011 to 2018, he was okay with Bitcoin, and then he did a hard pivot.
Yeah.
He even wrote a Bitcoin black paper, which I haven't read, but I've seen some analysis of. What's going on? What's going on with our boy Taleb? How do you go from, one of the most brilliant, at least brilliant writers, I don't really know him beyond his books, obviously, to being a Bitcoin proponent, at least to some extent, to now doing this hard 180 to being completely anti-Bitcoin. What do you think happened there?
I mean, we kind of know what actually happened in public, which was that he and Safety actually had a public spat over approach to dealing with COVID. So early 2020, Taleb was kind of using more of a precautionary principle and saying like, hey, this thing looks like it could be really bad, better to be safe than sorry. And Safety was more of the view that, less interference is better, and disease is probably, let's just build up natural immunity or whatever his arguments were. And they kind of clashed over that. And then that basically turned personal very, very quickly. They both got in a name calling, and all of a sudden Taleb was throwing the baby out with the bathwater and coming out anti-Bitcoin as well. I did read the black paper, and there's nothing interesting in it, sadly. So, it's I think it all hinged on basically an assumption that there was an absorbing barrier for Bitcoin, which if that absorbing barrier is zero, and there's some percentage chance that it could be zero, then the whole thing by definition has to go to zero. It was like this weird circular reasoning tautology that the whole thing hinged on, and just kind of falls apart if you understand money. So, it was sad. It was kind of, just a personal thing that he then tried to dress up in some academic veneer. But it just kind of died on the vine, because even people that didn't like Bitcoin that would read that paper wouldn't get convinced by it.
Yeah, some of the I saw a mathematical analysis of the paper just saying it had bad math in it from several mathematicians outside of Bitcoin with no skin in the game, so to speak. Do you think that, so you think it was a personal spat with Saifedean that caused him to do this 180, and then he tried to put some intellectual window dressing on it via the black paper and other tweets and whatnot?
I think that's exactly what happened.
Is he then embroiled in a self-deception of some sort?
Seems clear that he is, but he also may be smart enough to know exactly what he's doing. I wouldn't put that past him either. It might not be self-deception at all. It might just be Bitcoin doesn't matter to him for whatever reason, and the personal vendetta matters more, and he's going to attack it with whatever, so he's not an honest participant in the debate, essentially. And we see that a lot. And I think a lot of times people who really try hard to be genuine and try to have debates that have sort of gentleman's rules of some sort will come up against people that actually just want to win the debate regardless. And you may not even know their reason, or maybe it's personal, or maybe they're statist as it comes to, arguing with, if you try to argue with Professor Plum, Mike Green about Bitcoin, like, up until recently when he started monetizing through Bitcoin. Before that, it wasn't a genuine conversation because he was just trying to win points like a high school debate captain or something. I think arguing with Udi is like that a lot of times. Like he's just literally trying to win points. And he's not actually trying to find truth.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had the honor of debating Mr. Mike Green, and he certainly didn't seem to be there to have any engaging or authentic conversation. It was more about just putting points on the board, as you would say, and on the debate team.
Yeah, I think Taleb is very competitive and really likes to win, and maybe takes the whole revenge thing a little too far sometimes, especially when it's personal and not something that. So when the goal is sort of like ego and aggrandizement, then he really can't be that magnificent person that he described in my favorite chapter of Bed of Prometheus, or sorry, Bed of Procrustes, right? The Maxims book.
Yeah,
like I love that chapter, but art, not the artist, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, so he then, I can't recall, he does have a stance on revenge, right? That he thinks, I don't recall what it is exactly, but it's funny to me because in a lot of his work, he describes the intellectual yet idiot. He's always blasting PhD economists, fiat economists, essentially putting them on blast as like the worst, most intellectually dishonest class of humans in the world. And Bitcoin is aligned with all of that pretty deeply. So it's just weird to see him fall prey to the things he's critical of in his writing.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that the story isn't completely written, because people with intellects the size of Nassim's often can come up with an intellectual self-convincing or jujitsu of some sort to come back around through some other avenue that wouldn't involve apologizing to Safe, that would put Safe in that thing like off in a box over here and have some other whole reason to justify getting into Bitcoin over here, just like Mike Green did, right? Like his new funds involve Bitcoin, and he's able to not have to go back and apologize to all the people over here from the past and still go forward and be in Bitcoin. I mean, it is going to be global money, so everybody's going to have to come around to it one way or another. It's going to be weird to fight it against money in the future.
Yeah.
So, I expect Nassim will be around for a while with his deadlifts and his slow walks and his red meat. And I hope that he comes back around to Bitcoin one way or another in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. It just seems like I guess despite all the intellectualism, all the intelligence, at the end of the day, we're still animals to some extent. We're obviously fallible, prone to error. And if the ego becomes really engaged, you can start doing all this post hoc rationalization, trying to justify everything you've done. I think we've all been through this to some extent. Maybe people that are more prominent in the public eye, like Nassim, or just notable for being intelligent, intellectual, are maybe even more prone to that, in that they can, you can argue your way into anything. You could probably argue your way out of anything, or at least think you can. And that can open you up, I guess, to just these forms of self-deception. So it's really interesting to see him go through that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that it opens up a little bit, which is tough, is the whole, were you and I sort of susceptible to Gell-Mann amnesia when it came to Taleb? Because, I watched him have spats in all kinds of other areas. And because of the quality of his writing and his speaking, I typically gave him the benefit of the doubt and assumed that he was on the right side of truth when, sort of getting in spats with academics in other non-Bitcoin areas. And now it's like, well, did he have a beef with that person? I don't know that subject nearly as well as I know Bitcoin. So, how can I be sure of what the truth was in that area? It's like, false in one, false in all kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So seeing him be mistaken about Bitcoin calls into question his credibility in past arguments. Or
big time.
Yeah, interesting. Well,
I tweeted yesterday or today, I think I tweeted like, if someone is willing to lie about Bitcoin, what else might they be lying about?